a big round of applause for our honorees, Judge Sam Biscoe and Dr. Michael Marder. This is a quote from Walt Rostow. The failure of Travis County to close the gaps between the poor and the middle class is, I believe, due to a lack of an urban strategy which confronts head-on the problem posed by the disadvantaged communities. There are no villains in this story. Having been engaged in this work for a decade and more, I can attest that I've never met more devoted or intelligent people than those that work on the problems of the disadvantaged men, women, and children of Travis County. The problem is that we have fallen into an extremely fragmented system that deals mainly with the various symptoms of the problem of disadvantaged communities, not the causes. As I've said and written often, I know of no community in our country that lacks one or more preventative programs, but I know of no city that has a preventative strategy on the requisite scale. Moreover, any civilized community will and should allocate some of its resources to damage control action, be it Meals on Wheels, aid to battered women and children, hospices for the seriously ill, etc. But we shall not solve, this is the key part, but we shall not solve the urban problem, and it is soluble if we do not have a positive preventive strategy. By definition, these many such independent efforts each work in magnificent isolation, mainly to reduce damage already done. We're reactive at best, is basically what I think Walt Rostow is saying, as opposed to proactive. I wonder if you would reflect on that, the need to have a strategy. In each of your disciplines, there is so much work that needs to be done, but there isn't a whole lot of strategy out there in advance of a problem. We get real concerned with problems once they occur, but we don't do enough on the front end to prevent those problems from happening to begin with. Judge, you talk about that for a second, if you would.
Well, I think he was right then, and the same applies today. Well, my thoughts are these. I think that beginning about 20 years ago, we learned the importance of collaboration in planning and also in action.
Right.
We are a sort of brainy community to too great an extent. And what I mean by that is that we will plan and plan and plan, study and study and study, and finally act. Some of these problems require immediate action because there's an immediate crisis that you have to deal with.
Right.
At the same time, though, they require strategic planning and putting more money into prevention, as he says. The problem, though, is that at some point you have to deal with the revenue that's available. And local governments have too many mandates from state and federal governments. I don't want to get into that, but every local official knows it's true and there's no way to get around it.
And we can accept as a given that we don't have nearly enough money to deal with the problems that we know are out there.
City of Austin, a whole lot of money in public safety. Travis County, a whole lot of money in the court system, the criminal justice system, corrections, etc. With discretionary dollars, and Health and Human Services would fall under the discretionary category. By the time you get down to those, you are real short of money. What I'm glad of, though, is that thanks to my conversations with the Rostows, and I was around 20 years ago when they and others created, the Austin Project.
Right.
We started putting more money into basic needs, prevention programs. What's clear today is that we got to spend a lot more money on pre-K. Otherwise, those kids won't transition to child care or to elementary school.
Right.
Starting about 10 years ago, Travis County started funding training for babysitting facilities to elevate them to quality child care for the education component. That's real important. A lot of people don't realize that Travis County funds aftercare in every middle school in the AISD at about $100,000 a pop. And the reason that was important to us is that these same kids are likely to end up at Gardner Betts, where they cost us $125 a day instead of a few dollars at school between 3:30 and 6 o'clock, when most of these kids get into trouble if they do.
You can pay now or you can pay later.
Absolutely.
Right, it has always been the case.
Yeah. The other thing is, just as an example, we know that this county is an urban area. It has a whole lot of ex-offenders, and ex-offenders have stigmas attached, and they have a hard time finding housing, getting into training programs, and finding a job. Travis County has taken that question, have you been convicted of an offense, off of our application. The City of Austin followed suit.
Yep.
We went a step further, though, and started giving training and job opportunities to those ex-offenders. And we have a lot of examples that we can point to today. And when I go out and talk to 20 or 30 ex-offenders, and I'm speaking generally, it's really irrelevant. They got real problems to deal with. They're in crisis situations. But if I can point to specific ex-offenders that we got jobs, who have been working with Travis County 2 or 3, and I can name them, then that's a real-life success story that they believe in. And so I think we need more of those real-life success stories that we can point to individuals in need and help out. So that's prevention, but later on. The answer to the problem really is helping the parents who have kids for whom they cannot provide, making sure that the basic needs are covered, shelter, food, clothing, health care, etc., but also providing early educational opportunities and then staying with those families because they are ours and they are our future. So we know that. At some point, though, you have to spend more dollars to make it happen, and that was his key point, I thought.
Yeah.
So we are close to that, not nearly where we ought to be.
Right.
But we're a whole lot closer, and I can say today that at Travis County, it's a constant education process. The 5 of us will buy into the strategy. It makes so much sense that it's hard not to.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, when you start appropriating dollars, then we've got to put these programs and services closer to the top. That's difficult to do if you're mandated to do a whole lot of other stuff.
Right. As with so much else, we have the will. We don't necessarily have the wallet. I understand.
Right.
That. Dr. Marder, pick up on what Judge Biscoe said. He talked about the importance of pre-K. There is really an effort to redefine education in this state as pre-K through 16. The kids who you encounter at the university, it's important for them to come into the university prepared to excel. So in some respects, the preventive piece there is proactivity on the part of the education system and making certain that those kids, as they go through, beginning with pre-K, are prepared to learn, are prepared to be educated, and get to you in a situation where they can take the best advantage of the work that you do.
I think education has one of the worst problems of acting rather than reacting. And one way to measure that is the fact that it actually takes 20 years for someone to get from being 0 to 20. So now this is something that parents know all about. You know, if you're a parent of a child, you're in it for the long haul. You're in it through the ups and the downs. You're there to support them.
Right.
But we don't have community supports that work like that. And furthermore, we tend to forget. If there are great initiatives and they help people, and these have outcomes 4, 5, 10, 20 years later, by the time those outcomes become visible, we tend to have forgotten they even happened. And I'll give 2 examples, which are not perfect, but which things I think that speak to the problem. One of them, which I think was a mixed blessing at the time, was that in 1987, the state of Texas abolished education degrees. It was a hard-fought battle at that time about getting the best and brightest into teaching. And 10 years after that, College of Natural Sciences started the UTeach program, which I now direct. And several years after that, large numbers of enthusiastic science graduates started going back into the schools. But to this day, if you ask most people, where do teachers come from, they'll say instantly, colleges of education.
Yeah.
Now, it's not that colleges of education are not a partner, but we had a reform. It was a big deal. We fought over this, for better or for worse. And now we don't even remember what that was to assess its consequences. As a second example, I'll point to something called the Student Success Initiative, which probably any teacher or principal in the school knows about, and the room knows about. School board people probably do too, and probably no one else does. It was a big deal in the state. It received a lot of state funding. At its peak, it was getting about $144 million a year, and the goal was to basically wipe out a certain class of failure amongst Texas kids. Guess what? I've looked back at the data. It worked. It happened. And it didn't just happen in the years where the kids were targeted. They went up, and they stayed up. But by the time it becomes possible to see this, and these kids are not yet through school all the way.
Yeah.
We just don't know what impact it's had yet on graduation because they haven't gotten to the point of graduating. And already the funding's been cut.
Yeah.
So there is no patience in education that matches the time it takes our kids to develop. One of the functions I think that a place like the University of Texas has to serve is to be slow. We're the ones, if anyone can be, that will try to go slowly enough, that we will do things long enough that maybe we'll have time to actually see the outcomes and be able to figure out whether we were on the right path or not.
But I want to ask you, where are the resources going to come from? I think we acknowledge that with more money, there's more that's possible, but there's a whole line of thinking lately that the problem is not that we don't have enough money, the problem is that we spend too much. And that you all, relatively speaking, just ought to figure out how to do more with less. That is the culture of our politics. It is the culture of our funding system. And in this low tax, low service state of ours, it has been, at least for the recent memory, always been thus. So, Dr. Marder, what do you do about that? Where do you get these resources?
Well, I think just about everybody in this room has been doing more with less over the past several years. How many of you stay up 1 hour later every night answering email than you did 5 years ago? Want to raise your hands? That's an example. The technology has come to us. It's a blessing. It's a challenge. I think it's absolutely right that we owe the public the best possible service that we can give, and we work every day to do that. Many colleagues here from the University of Texas, we are constantly trying to find new and more efficient ways to carry out the tasks that are given us. And I think every teacher that I know in schools is constantly striving to do that too. In many cases, I think we would be on a superb path if we would just not be cut anymore. And the data that I showed earlier indicate that actually, although you may have the impression that things are sinking or flatlining, they're not. We've been getting pretty constant resources, and area after area, graduation rates, student performance, I could go on and on about what the data actually show. Things are getting better. So I guess my answer would be this. I think the public is demoralized, believing it's been giving more resources and not been getting anything for it. And I'd like to spread a much more positive message. Actually, we've been working with pretty constant resources for a long time. And guess what? We've been doing a better job. So have some faith, guys, because we're working for you.
Right. So, from a resource standpoint, flat is the new up, right? We should just be happy to hold on to what we have, and hopefully performance will come from that. Judge, the counties are in a tough spot, right? Because the state decides every 2 years. Here is the list of things we're going to stop paying for as a way to, quote, balance our budget. Right. And all that stuff rolls downhill to you guys. And so the cities and the counties and the school districts and the hospital districts, they suddenly have to decide either we're going to provide the services that the state no longer provides, which may require raising taxes, and that's on us, or we're going to cut services because we can't afford to do it ourselves, and that's on us. You're in a tough spot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you
That's why I don't like the state and federal governments.
You don't?
No.
You want to secede?
However,
I hear that's out there as a possibility.
Oh no, I'm not there.
Yeah.
But I think that even when times are good, the same thing happens.
Yeah.
We've got unfunded mandates. Even when times are good, when the legislature's in town, I walk around nervous throughout the session because I never know what will happen.
Right.
But several things are true. One is that we have to face the fact that these challenges don't go away.
Right.
We have to address them and the best way we can. Two is that what taxpayers want is to see money being spent wisely. So they want to see you striving to achieve efficiency, cost effectiveness, etc. But they also want to see programs that work. And that's why you got to give them specific examples of good outcomes. I don't know that we've done a good job of that historically. We do better today than we did 10 years ago, but we're not where we ought to be, but I think we're moving in the right direction. The other thing is what I would call political will. We have to educate the public that some of these investments will not show good returns overnight, but they will long term. It's kind of like the ex-offender strategy. The strategy is to put these individuals to work so they can pay taxes and become contributing citizens rather than rely on the social services network and their dependents rely on the same network too. So you want it to become multi-generational, that they are contributors rather than just the opposite. And I think taxpayers will understand that if you can point to specific examples where that's done. The other thing, and I dropped this. Yeah. When I chat with taxpayers, they want to see the city, the county, other governmental entities trying to collaborate, trying to work together.
Right.
They want to know that we have done our best to eliminate unnecessary duplication.
Yep.
But at the same time, they appreciate that we are vulnerable in several areas. Our population is growing, and the number of people in need is growing also. Kids who free lunch program keeps increasing, And I don't know that anybody that knows the facts can predict that that'll end in the foreseeable future, unless we put more dollars into that prevention strategy that the Rostowers were advocating.
I'm hearing you say, Judge, and I'm hearing you say, Dr. Marder, that there are actually success stories to be told.
Yes, sir.
So do we have a communications problem? Because the reality is, Dr. Marder, I pay attention to this stuff. There are a lot of people in this room who pay attention to this stuff. The success that you demonstrated in your presentation, I have to say, was news to me to a large degree. It's probably news to a lot of people in this room. Maybe we just need to spend money on publicists. I mean, do we not need to communicate the successes that we're having better? Because that really seems to be a common theme in what I'm hearing here.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Good night. We've solved the problems of the world. It sounds like it's as much of a communications problem as it is anything else.
You said at the beginning that we have to get to a point where people who come into a subject with different beliefs have a way to talk.
Right.
An experiment I've been trying, and perhaps you saw a little bit of the experiment tonight, is not to lead with opinions or even conclusions, but simply try to ground everybody in where we are using things like data that we can all agree are a really good starting point. Now, anyone who's dealt with data knows that they are a little bit more slippery than they seem, and they can be presented in different ways. But I was trying to give you stuff as pretty raw as I could. And I think it tells a story, and I think it tells a story that many, many people can converge on. So
well, it's a positive story.
It turns out to be a positive story. Yeah. There are many other positive stories. Graduation rate. How many of you think that Texas graduation rates are terrible? Okay, well, I will be glad to show you data later that may surprise you. They surprised me. I'm often surprised by what happens when I look at what careful people have assembled. But the thing that I would say is that the habit of not looking at things like facts and leading with opinions, the standard structure of the op-ed, is causing polarization, and I'm hoping that we can combat it by developing a practice every now and then of just a different communication strategy. Let's get the facts, let's agree on some of those, let's identify problems before we get to solutions, and then let's just sit down and see how much we can agree on.
I'm being told we have a few minutes left. I want to ask you both one final question. If the Rostowers were here, I think they would be, if they were still with us, they'd be thinking about this. We have a situation that I think of in this state as demographic inevitability. The change in our population in Texas is not coming, it's here. We know from the census numbers that over the last 10 years we added 5 million people to the state's population, 89% non-Anglo, 69% Hispanic. We know that we will very quickly be a Hispanic majority state. Over the last 10 years, 228 of the 254 counties saw a real increase in the Hispanic population. Anglo population declined in 161 of those counties. We know the trend lines. They're here. They're visible to us. As a nod to the Rostowers and to Walt's quote specifically, have we done anything? Have we done enough? Have we done anything to embrace the change that's coming and to prepare for it? And if we haven't, as I suspect you think we've not, what do we need to be doing? What does everybody in this room need to be doing to address the change that is coming to the population with the implications it has for things like education and health and criminal justice and all that? Judge Biscoe, you first.
Well, I think we are aware of the change. I don't know that we've done what we should to prepare to address it. But it all goes back to education and training. I don't know if the numbers are like that. I'm not sure that the racial makeup matters that much. The challenges would be the same.
They would be the same.
We just have to get ready for a different Texas. African Americans here in Travis County are at the same percentage that they were when I came here to go to law school in 1970. That doesn't shock me. But it does surprise me that more African Americans don't come here to live. At the same time, I was not born and reared here. I was born and reared in East Texas and couldn't leave soon enough. So Austin's kind of like heaven. But if you're born in Austin, African American, and you go off to school, I'm told that you stay there.
Right.
And I guess for the same reasons that I stay here. But the challenges are there. Whether we deal with them or not, they grow. And the question is whether they grow sort of constructively, positively, or whether they grow and fester and really become too much for us to handle. But when you look at our vulnerabilities, what's clear to me is we need to invest a whole lot more resources to start addressing them yesterday.
Right.
And I don't see us doing that. So we could approach it with a lot more urgency. I know the Rothschilds will be a bit disappointed that we seem to be looking at it and sort of disbelieving.
Shrugging our shoulders.
Yeah, instead of looking and preparing.
Right.
I was in a meeting today of the Community Action Network where we were trying to get on top of the same thing. You know, there's public awareness, there's public education. I would say education because what we want you to do is appreciate the facts but prepare to take action. The political will has to be stronger than it is right now, not only for politicians but for taxpayers. Right. But taxpayers want to be able to conclude, like I do, that this is what the steps we take today for us to have a better tomorrow.
Right. One of the things, Dr. Marder, we're going to see is a whole bunch of kids who are first in their family to go to college. Showing up at your doorstep and the doorsteps of your colleagues, are we doing enough to prepare them, to prepare the university environment, higher education for that influence?
I'm going to tell a story about what's been happening in the last 3 or 4 weeks, which I think illustrates to me that Texas stands on the edge of a knife and could fall either forward or backward. This is a story of what's been happening in Brownsville with the physics department. Brownsville is an example of what Texas has done to respond to the changing demographics. Brownsville became part of the UT system because of the MALDEF suit. And so a major university started to be built. And within that university, there was a department, the physics department, that was perhaps the pride and joy. Gravity wave detector is internationally known. A very strong group of around 20 faculty grew up. But there was one problem. They built the graduate program first, and they thought once they had that really in place, then they would start getting people from the local community interested in physics to go to this department they had built. They started that about 3 years ago. They didn't know that they were running a little late because the Higher Education Coordinating Board had set up efficiency metrics. And about a month and a half ago sent them a letter saying, you're shut down. You weren't fast enough. Well, there has been quite a scramble ever since. And I'm glad to say that last week, after a lot of effort that involved all kinds of people behind the scenes and a great deal of goodwill from national organizations as well as from many people around Texas, the physics department at Brownsville was saved. And it will be possible for students from the Valley to have a physics degree. So a lot of investment, preparation, but the metrics are coming. We're pulling back. Which way are we going to go? My opinion is either we step forward, grab opportunities, and build, knowing that the people all across the state from every walk of life are capable of the highest level of achievement, or we rip apart our institutions trying to save money, and we start going into a sinking spiral. I'm talking to my wife every day in Greece. I know what a country's sinking spiral sounds like as it reaches its end. We do not want to go there.
Okay, well, on that upbeat note, let us again give a big round of applause for our honorees, Judge Sam Biscoe and Dr. Michael Marder. Thank you very much.